Session is a conversation with Mike Duggan. Please welcome the former mayor of the city of Detroit, Mike Duggan, and welcome back to the stage, Sandy Baruah.
Mike, it feels like we were just here a year ago.
Yeah.
So
Glad people showed up again.
what the hell happened, man? Riding high in February, shot down in May.
So let me start by saying thank you, Sandy, and to the chamber, and for so many people in this room that supported me. And I'm glad I get a chance to come and talk to you, because my whole life has been about facing reality as it is and not as you wish it to be. And so I started off in December of 24, and I looked at pretty much all the numbers that you showed here, that this state had been declining for decades as the Republicans and Democrats switched back and forth. And I really reached the conclusion the only way to break the cycle was to get outside the parties. And I had no idea how it would work, and I started. And everybody I started with, I said, look, I'm going to go as long as I can, as long as I'm winning, and see if you come along with me. And it was a remarkable 18 months. I was probably doing 6-8 town halls a week in every corner of this state. It started out at 15%, and they said, what's this independent thing? And then people started to get it. Climbed to 19, and I was up here last year at 21, 26, and you could feel the crowds growing, the people being excited. And last February, your poll showed that I had pulled that even at 30%. And the most important part of that poll was that it showed that more than 60% of Democrats and more than 60% of Republicans were open for voting for an independent. And you could feel it in this state that the people of this state feel like the fighting in Lansing has left them behind. And I was gaining, and the lane was wide open. And if I'd have been sitting here in March, I'd have told you, I'm on track to win this thing, and it's not even going to be close. And then the national winds changed dramatically. Trump goes into Iran, gas prices start to soar, and my town halls change from I'm the farmer who's been forgotten by Lansing, the young person who can't find affordable housing mission. It turned to, with all the threat we're under from Washington, how do you know you're not going to split the vote and turn it over to Republicans? And you could feel the tone change. And in April, we did a poll, and I was down 5 points. For 15 months, I had gained every single poll, and I was down 5. And then your poll came out in May, and I was down 11. I listened to people say, this poll's fake, that poll's fake. The truth of the matter was, your polling that said I was at 30% in February is accurate, and the polling that said I was down 11 in May was accurate. But that wasn't the thing that really concerned me. The thing that concerned me is that the polling that showed 60% of Democrats and Republicans were open to voting for me in February, our polling was showing 65% of Democrats were afraid to vote for me because they were afraid of tipping the election to the Republicans. That the $5 a gallon gas, the Iran war, has caused, you can talk to your friends and neighbors, has caused an anger against the Trump and the Republicans. And you can say the house is on fire in Michigan, but in Michigan it's a slow burn. What has happened in this country, at least in the Democratic attitudes, is there is a depth of anger that has displaced everything else. And so our polling was showing my favorabilities hadn't gone down at all. But what had happened is people who were voting for me were shifting Democrat. And so we look at that, and I said, okay, I'm down 11 points in May. That by itself wasn't terribly troubling. But when 65% of Democrats say they're afraid to vote for me because I'm going to tip it, now that lane is really narrow. And then there was the flip piece, which is the people of this state have been enormous in their financial support. I outraised all of the candidates last year, but 94% of my donations came from the state of Michigan. A majority of my chief opponents came out of state. There is very deep pockets in national money for Republicans and Democrats, tens of millions of dollars. And there's a reason for it. Because I'm not telling you that the California Democrats are that concerned about whether our 8-year-olds read. They are very concerned about the 28 presidential. And with only a handful of states in play, huge amounts of money is going to pour in here to make sure it's either a Republican or a Democratic governor. And so I started out thinking there's got to be a national fundraising base to offset this. And I spent time in California, New York, LA. You hear all this stuff about no labels and the like. The fact is, there is no national fundraising base that says, I want an independent governor in Michigan. There's just not. And I spent a lot of time with everybody. And so here is the reality I'm facing in the last week or so, where I looked at this and I said, okay, the path has narrowed significantly. I've got to go back to my Michigan donors and say no national money is coming. The only way I overcome these odds is Michigan donors doubling what they've already done. And the question I had to ask is this. When the folks here and the folks across the state looked me in the eye and said, okay, Mike, if we double what we've done, do you feel confident on a path to victory? And the truth was, in good conscience, I couldn't say that. Do I really think that the partisan climate between Trump and the Democrats is going to get less partisan as we get closer to November? And so when you spend a year and a half of your life, day and night, working hard for something, and the time I was spending in farmhouses and the outstate folks coming my way, thinking there was a chance, it was a really hard thing. But at some point I just had to say, was I going to come to this conference and tell you all, double down on what you're doing, don't worry, I got a clear path to win when I don't mind? I didn't feel that, and so I just couldn't do it. And so I'm sorry for the people here who are disappointed, but I would say I would have disappointed you far more if I had gone for another 5 months knowing there's not a path and continuing to come back to you and say, we've got to fund it. So I face reality as it is. It was a really hard thing to do, but I did want to come up here and be able to talk to you directly about why I did it and just say thank you for so many people here. You had people in this room supported me when I was here in the early 90s on the Smart Millage, people here in the late 90s when I was repairing the Detroit Public Schools. The number of times at this conference the Chamber has supported what I've done, I'm enormously grateful for all of it. Thank you. Okay. Okay, I promised myself I wasn't going to get emotional, but you're making it really hard. So thank you.
I told Mike as we were walking out here, he said, I know they're going to stand for you. And they did, it just was a little delayed. So obviously you made a lot of calls before that 11 a.m. press conference. I don't want to say pleased, but I was glad I was on that call list. But boy, that was a shocker. You know, that, oh my goodness, you've decided to drop out. Any thought to staying in just a little bit longer? Obviously, polls fluctuate and, you know, political winds shift, especially these days. No thought at all of giving it another month? Yeah. Or did you ever think about making your announcement here? I mean, come on, give me the win.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. No, you obviously needed to do it back home.
Sandy, your old pollster agrees with my assessment that I don't have a path. No.
Richard was my call after you called me.
And he didn't call me up and say, hey, Mike, you're misreading this. In fact, we phoned pollsters all over the country, and they said they're seeing the same thing everywhere. Democrats are surging at all levels of offices everywhere in the country. This was not some oddity or some blip. And so, no, and then, you know, people calling me up saying, well, you know, you could have run as a Democrat. And I thought, it's a hard thing to explain the way I looked at this. Never for 1 second did I think about that. In my life, my goal was not to be governor. My goal has been to try to do things that are going to outlive me. And in 2003, when the Detroit Medical Center Board voted to close Receiving Hospital, close Hutzel Hospital, close the Carmanis Cancer Hospital, hire a bankruptcy lawyer, and then called me and said, hey, do you want a job? I took that job not to patch things up or to close hospitals, but to build something. And I'm really proud of the fact that 22 years later, all of those hospitals are still open and operating. They're working differently, but those hospitals are there. And when I went into the city of Detroit, and a bunch of you signed up when I wasn't on the ballot as a write-in candidate for mayor, and people didn't think a guy who looked like me could get elected, I didn't say to the people of Detroit, your problem is your street lights are out or that the ambulances aren't showing up for an hour. I said, the problem is the us versus them politics. The real problem with the city is black versus white, city versus suburbs, Detroit versus Lansing, and I want to change the politics. And I can't tell you how pleased I was last year to see my successor, Mary Sheffield, running a campaign, no us versus them. Everything was about unity, no black versus white. She says, I'm going to build on what Mike did, and I'm going to take it further with her own ideas and her own initiatives. Detroit is going to continue on a good trajectory. It's going to outlive me, and it's what I was trying to do. And then my decision on this was, you could have been in my analysis. You think about the three last governors of this state, Jennifer Granholm, Rick Snyder, Gretchen Whitmer. Three of the smartest people I have ever met. Dedicated public servants who wanted nothing more than to help this state. And the sum total of their 24 years is what you saw. 16th to 44th in third grade rating. 19th to 40th in per capita income, 49th in population growth. And I look at this and I say, is the problem that they weren't good enough? Or is there a problem with the system? And it really is what I call, right, it's the purple state syndrome. It really is that every 2 to 4 years, we're switching back and forth from Republicans to Democrats, and we undo the initiatives of the last one. There is no common purpose. But when you think about third grade reading, we know what the methods are. And they're teaching phonics, and they're small class sizes, and they're tutoring. When it comes to affordable housing, which is in bad shape, our young people are moving out, we know what the formulas are. We built 6,000 in Detroit. When it comes to jobs, we're watching Ohio and Indiana eat our lunch right now. We know what the strategies are, but every 2 years we change direction. And I thought, could it be that you could have a Republican and Democratic Party that could disagree on a lot of things, but we could have a common Michigan strategy on K-12 education, on affordable housing, and on bringing the jobs of the future. And I really thought there was potential to do that. But and I thought it had to be done from outside the parties. And I stayed with it every second I could. But some wrote, I blundered. I ran as an independent because I didn't know it was going to be harder to win as an independent than a Democrat. I said, yeah, right. I ran as an independent because I thought it was the only way to change this 24-year trajectory. And now it's going to probably take people from outside of government, kind of thing you're doing here today, to get the two parties to work together better than they are.
So I'll make a quick comment before my next question. You talked about the polling and how the polling changed. One of the Democratic operatives in our February poll, which showed Mike tied at 30, the three top candidates were 30, 30, 30. We were called by this Democratic operative part of Mike Duggan's MAGA donor base, and that the poll could not be trusted because we had endorsed Mike Duggan. This last poll, which had played a big part in your decision, same pollster, same methodology, same thing. It's like, yeah, that poll seems right.
Yeah.
I mean, and that is the kind of cynicism and that's kind of comment or just political crassness that just makes people cynical. And frankly, there's a reason. There's a reason why. So anyway, I just wanted to make that comment because it really kind of encapsulates, the political dysfunction that we have here. So I want to stick on this theme of running as an independent. So my theory, having spent a lot of time in politics myself, is that when you ask Americans, you ask Michiganians, would you support an independent? That number just keeps growing, and our polling continues to show that. But why is it that independents don't succeed? Well, my theory is that, well, people in theory want to vote for an independent, but one problem is that there's not a name in the frame. It's like, okay, an independent seems good in concept, but then you put a name in the frame, and one of two things happens. People say, oh, I know who he or she is. He or she's a nut job, not voting for him or her, or never heard of him or her. I'm not voting for someone I've never heard of before. You didn't fall into any of those categories, but yet you still couldn't finish the campaign. What is the trajectory, or is there a trajectory, for independents to be a political force in this country that gets us out of this radical swings that we are in, where we swing from left to right, left to right?
It'll happen when you guys don't have to have a presentation saying the house is on fire, right? I mean, think about that. And I saw it every day. You're polling that people think it's average, and we looked at these numbers on the per capita income. And over the last 10 years, if Michigan had just changed at the rate of the rest of America, the average Michigan family in the last 10 years, you'd have $70,000 more in your bank account today. I mean, that's just how far we've slipped recently. Now, 20 years from now, it's going to be $150,000 more in your bank account today. People aren't feeling it yet because it's so gradual. And I think the change will come when they do. But I actually had a different strategy because I understood that. I'm doing these town halls. I know that people don't see it as a crisis. You ask them about their schools. And yeah, I'm not really happy with my schools, but they don't think they're 44th in America. They just don't believe it. But I tried something different. I sat down with every core constituency group out of the Republican and Democratic Party. I sat with the farmers. I sat with the business leaders. I sat with the League of Conservation Voters and the MEA, the heart of the Democratic groups. I sat with AFSCME, and these are the leaders who actually know what's going on. And you want to talk about hard conversations. The people that are core to the Democratic Republican Party, I said, you know what? Why don't you, it's not working for you. They all know it's not working for them. This change in every 2 years, and every 2 years being the most important election in history. And I'll just give you an example. I hope they won't mind me talking about it. I spent dozens of hours with the League of Conservation Voters and their board members. And I said, look at my track record. We're building solar fields in Detroit to power all of our buildings. I took down the Detroit incinerator. If you objectively look at my track record, you should like what I'm doing, even though you're core to the Democratic Party. And then I'm spending tons of time with farmers. And for some reason, the farmers' personalities and mine bonded, and they were feeling neglected by Lansing, and they were starting to bond with the guy who was the mayor of the city that had been neglected for a long time. But you look at the two of them, and they fight each other in Lansing all the time. The League of Conservation Voters has issues with waste runoff, with fertilizer runoff, with algae, with the watershed. And the farmers are furious. They are being pressured on so many sides, and to see rules changing on them, they can't survive. And so they're clashing to basically a dead standoff in Lansing on issue after issue. I'm sitting in the room with these folks. You sit with the people of the League of Conservation Voters, nobody cares more deeply about the stewardship of land and water than they do. Then you sit with farmers who have been on that land for 4 generations, their family has cared for it. Nobody cares about stewardship of that land and their watershed more than they do. And I listen. There is a 70% overlap in what they want. And I said to both of them, how about you both endorse me? Put your staff in my campaign office. We'll hammer out the 30% you don't disagree on. Can you imagine what a powerful force for good it would be if you had the Republican farming community and the Democratic League of Conservation Voters working and changing this for the long run? And they listened to me. They didn't endorse anybody else. They were listening. I don't know if I would have gotten them there or not, but I can tell you this. The more I listened, the more I thought, we have more in common than we thought. But of course, it's in the Democrats' interest to tell them they're 100% with them and raise money against the Republicans. And it's the Republicans' interest to tell the farmers they're 100% with them and fire them up against each other and raise money against each other. And I'm saying, who is saying, forget the 30% you disagree on? Build on the 70% you do. And it's happening today with Chandra Metaferi, one of the great leaders the MEA's had, and the business leaders of Michigan. The #1 state in America on test scores is Massachusetts. And it's because in the 1990s, the business leaders in Massachusetts convinced Republicans and Democrats to adopt a plan where they doubled the funding of Massachusetts schools over 7 years with real accountability. 30 years later, Massachusetts, year in and year out, leads this country in achievement. And think about the wealth that's been gained in Massachusetts. And I'm thinking, could we see the day when the MEA and the business leaders of Michigan actually hammer out something and bring the politicians along? I hope that there will be people out there without me in the race who say, okay, maybe it won't come from the politicians. Maybe we ought to leave the politicians out of the equation and go sit down with the groups that seem like they're on the other side, because I'm telling you, you have a lot more in common than you think.
So a handful of business organizations jumped out with early endorsements of the Duggan campaign, including us, our friends at the Lansing Chamber. You had scores of endorsements from traditional Democrat-leaning union groups. I know almost for certain that you had more business support waiting in the wings. What's your sense of, had you been able to continue the campaign, if it made sense, would you have continued to get these kind of left-leaning, right-leaning endorsements as the campaign went on?
You know, there's two different groups, and there were a lot of very large business organizations who I had long conversations with, who said, we'll be with you, just not yet. Let's wait till filing deadline, let's wait till after the primary is over. And you can't blame them. They're like, okay, if Mike could actually do this, it would change the state. But if I get all the way out there and the independent crashes and burn, I burn my bridges either with the Republican Party or
tell me about it.
Party. Right. You know how it was, right? And I had people look me in the eye and say, we've decided to endorse you, but just not yet. The interesting was, the ones who didn't hesitate were the unions. This was the damnedest thing. I had more than 30 unions endorse me. And these guys, they had the immediate concerns of their members. And so the carpenters and the plumbers and the bricklayers are like, you know what? I don't care if the Democrats are mad at me right now. There's $10 billion a building in Detroit where nothing was going on, and Mike has gotten us jobs, I'm with you. The firefighters and the police officers, the same thing. The bus drivers who said, I don't care if I piss off the Democrats right now. Mike has delivered, and if he's the governor, my members are going to have more jobs. And it was so interesting to watch the dynamics as one after another these Democratic unions endorsed, took enormous grief from Democratic legislators, frankly, who called and threatened him, as well as the party chair, but who made an immediate decision that it was in the best interest of their members. But these unions aren't in position to offset a $40 or $50 million National Democratic Governors Association, Republican Governors Association fund. They just weren't. And that was the reality. And so I will always be grateful. We had a day in August where we did an announcement. We had 1,000 people at the train station. 200 elected officials stood up and endorsed me, about 100 on the Republican side, 100 on the Democratic side. The grief they took, the Democratic Party immediately shut off voter lists to the Democratic officials who endorsed me. And they said, you know what? My city is going to be better off if Mike's the governor. I'll take the heat. And this was the hardest part of my decision, as I was calling all those people as I did to you, and say if there was any path at all, I'd fight this to the bitter end. But we hit a point where, you know, once I got 11 points down, All those folks who said, Mike, we'll get back to you after filing deadline, or we'll get back to you after the primary, that's what they were saying to me when I was even. When I was 11 points down, you could just see it wasn't going to happen, and I couldn't blame them there. Am I going to sever my 20, 30-year relationship with the party when you're 11 points behind and slipping? You could see what was going to happen.
So 2026 is still going to be a hugely important election in this state. We're going to be the center of America's political universe. We're not going to be able to watch television for 6 months.
Right?
What is your advice to the next governor? What can you share with him or her based on what you learned as being Detroit's mayor, being a business CEO, your other governmental positions? What would you say to him or her when they call you? Because they will.
So I'm having conversations already, and I've had long talks with several of the candidates for governor from both parties. I've heard from Senate candidates, congressional candidates, a whole bunch of state rep and state Senate candidates, and they're all asking me the same thing. I mean, they were watching the size of the crowds I was getting, people who were so angry at both parties. And they're trying to figure out right now, what do I do? And I'm saying to every one of them, you have to decide for yourself, is your biggest goal in life to win that office, or is your biggest goal in life to accomplish something? It will be relatively easy for the Democrats to sweep in this state this year and across the country by just attacking Trump, attacking the Democrats. If your goal is the office, that's the shortest way. And of course, we live that in 2020 nationally. Joe Biden became president, got a Democratic House, a Democratic U.S. Senate, right? Fueled almost entirely at anger at Trump and the Republicans. 4 years later, you had a Republican sweep. You had a Republican president, a Republican House, a Republican Senate. If you do not run on what you're going to accomplish, and if you don't have a plan to build on it across the aisles, the Democrats are going to sweep in 26, and the Republicans are going to sweep them back out in 30. It's what's going to happen. It's what's been happening in this state over and over. Think about Gretchen Whitmer. In the last 8 years in this state, we had, 8 years ago, Rick Snyder and a Republican trifecta. Then we had Gretchen Whitmer and a Republican House and Senate. Then in 22, a Democratic trifecta. And today, a Democratic governor, a Democratic Senate, and a Republican House. You've had 4 different configurations in this state in the last 8 years. Now, you tell me, have we done anything on our economic development strategy? If this state's got an economic development strategy, I got no damn idea what it is. Okay? We've gone from mega credits to gardening to transformational brownfield, which I helped pass, which was the Detroit model, discount people on taxes as they build but don't give them money up front, to SOAR, where we gave away $250 million cash grants, to now you've got not only is SOAR canceled, transformational brownfields are canceled. You got people talking about canceling MEDC. Do you have any idea what Indiana and Ohio are doing here right now in the middle of this chaos? Every single national company is told if you go to Michigan, you're in a state that changes policy and direction every 2 years. And the other day, I think I hit rock bottom. I'm at the BP, I'm pumping $5 gallon gas into my car. I'm as mad as can be, and the little guy comes on the TV screen where they got the ads. And he says, Ohio is the second cheapest state in America at affordable housing. 25-year-old kid, move here and start your life. And I thought, these jobs, Ohio, which as Bob mentioned before, they've got a 20-year strategy where they took the liquor business, and John Kasich, a governor who was a bipartisan governor while he was a Republican, laid out a plan that outlasted him that is fueling their growth. And I'm saying to the Republicans and Democrats, you have a choice. The strategy that helps you win or the strategy to change the direction of the state. And I am hoping you see candidates emerge this year who take a look at what happened with my campaign and say, you know what? I'm going to reach out to a strategy. I'm going to run on what I'm going to do. And I'm going to run on involving both sides, right? And their success is going to depend on you crossing the aisles and backing the people who are running that way. and are doing those things. Because at the end of the day, I do think the pressure is going to have to come from outside Lansing. Lansing's not going to reform itself, and I think what you are doing here with this theme is a great start. So thank you all very much for what you've done.
Well, I want to say that, the if only question is rattling around in a lot of people's minds, if you had been able to raise the money, because I do know that anytime you got in a room, you owned the room. Everyone who was in that room, I don't care if it was in northern Michigan, East Michigan, West Michigan, you left with everyone in that room as a Duggan supporter. So, Mike, you are always welcome on this stage. And on behalf of all of us, thank you.
Thank you all very much.